Hello and welcome to part 14 of a video series in the Butter Game Engine. In this video, I'll be showing you how to create a limited ammunition setup. In other words, if your character has the ability to shoot or fire bullets or projectiles, in this video, we'll learn how to make it so that their ammo can run out. In this video as well, I'll show you how to create an ammo pack that when your character walks over, they pick it up and they replenish their ammunition. In this video as well, I'll be showing you how to create a heads-up display that shows the player how much ammunition they have left, and of course, it'll go down to 0 when they're out of ammo. Let's go ahead and jump in. In this video though, I will be assuming that you have gone ahead and watched video number 8 in this series on how to create rapid fire shooting. If you have not seen that video yet, you'll be a little bit confused, so I'll put a link to that on the screen right now. And for this video, I've already started with a file that I've set up, and I'll be talking about that right now, but you can go ahead and download this exact file in the description area below. In this file, I have a very simple character. It's a little blue cube, and I can control that on my screen with the W key on my keyboard and mouse movement. If I press P to play the game, I can press W to move forward, and I can use the mouse movement to move my character and steer them left and right. And that's all good and great, but I also have the ability to shoot. So I can hold down the left mouse button, and I can shoot, and as you can see, it's got rapid fire shooting of these little rings or toruses. And that's all good and great. But as you can see, I'm never running out of ammunition. So this is our starting file. If I press escape, I'll show you how I did all that. On the cube, with the cube selected, this is where I'm controlling the movement of my character. I have a mouse movement sensor and a mouse look actuator. And I've only got the mouse look actuator turned on for the X-axis, and that makes the character spin left and right when you move your mouse on the X-axis on your screen. I've got a W keyboard sensor set up to move the character with character motion down here at 0.3 on the local Y-axis. That's forward for my character, and that's all good and great. But how do I fire? Well, if I press 0 on my numpad right now, I'm looking through my camera. I'll press 0 on the numpad to break out of the camera view. You can see that attached to the front of my character, parented to the character, is this empty object. And with the empty object selected, it has a mouse left button sensor. And attached to that, so when you press the left mouse button, this empty will add a new object with the edit object actuator. It's adding a copy of a ring object, which you can't see right now. And that ring object has a little bit of logic on it so that when it fires, it knows to move forward, or when it gets created, it knows to move forward. And that's all good and great. Let's go ahead and find that ring object. Where it is actually is in a separate layer. When you create a new object, or when you add an object with the edit object actuator, it has to be, or the original one has to be in a separate layer. So down here on this next layer, there it is, that's the ring. It has a few logic bricks on it. It has an always sensor to move it forward always as soon as it's created. So it always moves forward at 0.8 on its local Y-axis. And this object is actually a static object. At the end of my video number 8 in this series, we actually made these toruses kind of fall down and spin as rigid body objects, but in this video I wanted the bullets just to kind of go forward without tumbling or falling or anything like that. I also have a delay sensor on this object, and after 240 game ticks, that's 60 times per second, so that is 4 seconds after they appear, they end themselves, they delete themselves, so the bullets don't go on forever and ever and ever. Okay, so that's the basic setup. If you didn't follow that, go ahead and watch video number 8 in this series. I'll put a link to that on the screen again for you. Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. I've got my character. I can steer, I can move around, I can shoot, but I want to create a limitedness of the number of bullets. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select that empty, so I'll right click to select it. I'm going to add a property to it. That property is going to be a number that every time we shoot a bullet, it's going to count down all the way down to 0. So with it selected, I'll press N on my keyboard down here in the logic editor window, and I'm going to add a game property. I'm on a Mac right now. I'm running Blender on a Mac, but if you're on a PC, I believe this properties panel is on the other side. It makes no difference. I'll go ahead and press add game property, and I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can see. The property that we're adding is going to be an integer, not a float. An integer is just like a counting number. It's a whole number without any decimal places, and that's great for counting. And I'm going to give it a name of ammo. Great, so now it has a name of ammo, and it's an integer. I'm going to give it a starting value of 30, and I'll press enter. So by default, when the game starts, you'll have 30 ammo. But this by itself is just a variable. It doesn't really mean anything. What we have to do is every time we click this left mouse button and we fire a new copy of the ring, when we add the ring object, we want it to count down one of this property. So I'm going to add an actuator, and an actuator is something that does something. It's a little bit of kind of visual code that does something. We want to make the property, so I'll select the property actuator. We want to take a specific property, this ammo property, so I'll select the property ammo. We want it to count down by 1. Now how you do this is we're not going to assign a value, we're actually going to add to it, and we're going to add -1, and I'll press enter. Adding -1 is the same as subtracting 1. If you're familiar with that level of math, that's great. So we want it to do two things when we click the mouse. We want it to make a new object and count down 1. So I'll connect these two things so it does those two things. It adds the object and it counts down 1 when you press the left mouse button. So if I press P to play my game and I click the left mouse button, I'm firing and it's counting down in the background all the way to 0. And it'll actually go down to negative numbers, because we're not actually controlling yet the ability for my character to need that property to be above 0. So what I need to do is make it so that it can only fire if ammo is above 0. So really, we need two conditions here. We need two conditions in order for these two things to happen. So I'm going to add another sensor. It's going to be a property sensor that we're going to set the property ammo, and we want the ammo to be greater than 0. So I'll press enter after typing 0. I'll connect these two things up. So when you have this AND controller in the middle, we don't talk about this too much, but it'll actually require that these two things are true. You're pressing the left mouse button down and the ammo is greater than 0. Those two things have to be true in order for the things on the actuator side to happen. I hope that makes sense, but I'll leave that on the screen. If you want to pause the video now and follow along, you can do that. So now, if I press P to play my game with my mouse in the 3D viewport, and I click and hold down, I'll be firing. But after I fire 30 bullets, as you can see, I'm still holding down, I'm still clicking, and nothing's happening because I've run out of ammunition. We can't see this number though, so let's go ahead and create a heads-up display scene. Right now we only have one scene in this file. It's just called scene. That's a bad name for it. So let's go ahead and click in this area and type game. And I'm going to create a new scene by clicking on this plus. This new scene is going to be called HUD, but we'll click on new. I will name it HUD. And in this scene, I've done this several times before in past videos, we're going to add a new camera. So I'll press Shift A on my keyboard. I'm going to add a camera. It's already rotated and it's sort of default rotation. I don't want that, so I'll press Alt R on my keyboard. Alt R clears the rotation of a selected object. I'll move it straight up. I want this camera, so I'll go to the camera tab with the camera selected. I'll change it to orthographic, which makes it a two-dimensional camera. And maybe I'll move it down a little bit. Great, I'll press 0 to go through the camera. I'll press Shift A. I'm going to add a few things. I'm actually going to add a torus to represent visually the kind of thing that we're firing. So I'll press Shift A, add a mesh torus, that's a donut. This torus is way too complex. This is a game, so we have to think about the number of polygons and faces and edges in our scene. We have, if I press Z on my keyboard, a lot of polygons here. I'm going to turn this way down, maybe to, let's say, 18, and then the minor segments go around, and that's 12, which is too many, so maybe just like that. 5, maybe 6, sure. I'll press S to scale this down, put it in the top corner. I'll give it a material. Right now it looks gray, but when I play my game, I'll have to change this scene over to Blender Game. I'll press P. It's white. Okay, let's go ahead and add a material to it. I'll click New. In fact, it's only white because I was in solid view. I want to switch over to texture view. If I press P, I believe, no, it's just going to be gray. I wasn't sure if it was going to be black or not because there isn't the light in the scene. I'm going to make this torus that same, what color was my projectile? It was this kind of red color. So I'll go back to the HUD and I'll give it a bright red material. I'll turn down specular and I might turn on shadeless. Shadeless will make it just totally red here. That's all good and great. Let's go ahead and press Shift A again. I'm going to add a text object right there. I only want an X because I want it to say like toruses and then a little X and then a number next to it that represents the number of ammo that I have left. So delete, delete, delete. I'll press X and press Tab to go back into object mode. I'll scale that way down. It's not very important. So I'll put that right there, maybe a little bit bigger than that. I'm going to convert this text object now to a mesh so I can put a material on it. The way you do that is with the text object selected, you can press Alt-C on your keyboard, or you can go to Object, Convert to, that's Alt-C, Mesh from Curve, Mesh Surf Text. And now it's a mesh. I can give it that same material, the same glowy red material 003. That's all great. Let's go ahead and add a text object. So I'll press Shift-A, I'll add a text object. This is going to be my counter. So I'm going to give it the same text that I want to start with. I'm starting with 30 bullets. That's what we determined in the property of that empty a few minutes ago. So I'll type 30 and press Tab to go back into object mode. This is where I want to, of course, place it. So I'll scale it down with the S key. I'll grab it with the G key and put it up here, maybe make it smaller. And you can scale these things to your heart's content, make it the right size and put it exactly where you want. But this 30 object needs to be smart. It needs to do a couple of things. It needs to have a variable or a property attached to it. So I'll do that right now with it selected. It's still a text object. I haven't converted it to a mesh yet. Or I'm not going to actually. I'm going to click on Add Text Game Property. Normally, meshes only have game properties, but text objects have this special text game property. And so I'll add one. You can only actually add one. I'm going to make it into an integer, and I'm going to give it actually no name. It doesn't need a name because there's only going to be one of them. And so here's the thing. The text game property is smart. If you type in a number actually in your text, so if you don't put like letters, if you just put numbers, which I have, 30, it understands that. And so it actually knows that this is a value that we can count and add and subtract to. That's all good and great. What I want to do here is listen for a message. And the message it's going to listen for, actually let's go ahead and add that. It's going to have a sensor. It's going to be a message sensor right there. We're going to listen for a message that has a subject of fire, exclamation mark. Every time, we haven't added this yet, every time you click the left mouse button to fire, it's going to send this message out. This text object is going to listen for it. So here it is, we're listening for a message with a subject of fire. And every time we do that, we're going to change this text property. So I'm going to add an actuator for properties. I'm going to connect this up. And the property we're looking for is just the text property. And I'm not going to assign to it. I'm going to add to it. I'm going to take away -1, or I'm going to add -1, which means I'm subtracting 1. So every time you, or this object hears the fire message, it's going to take away 1 from its text property. This is a little bit confusing because we actually have variables or properties in two places that do the same thing. This text property only affects this text object. Okay, one more thing here. This text object, if I press P, will be white. You also notice how that changes a little bit in the size and the way it looks. That's because Blender doesn't really handle fonts properly in the game engine. So you can actually go to the font tab and select a regular font by browsing on your computer to the font folder on your computer. If you're on a Mac, it'll be on your root hard drive in your library folder in a folder called fonts. If you're on a Windows PC, it'll be on your C drive in the Windows folder in a folder called fonts in the Windows folder. I'm not going to bother with that in this video, but just so you know, that's where you find the fonts and that's how you can change them. And again, they might show up a little bit differently when you actually play your game, so you might have to scale them up or down. But fonts in a game engine cannot have materials. It just doesn't work, unfortunately. So how you give text objects a color is under the Object tab. Objects can actually have their own inherent color that's not a material. So I'm going to change this to that bright red. And this material cannot have shininess or mirroredness or an image texture. It can just be this color. So when I press play, it's now red. And I can adjust it if I want it to be a little bit darker to match the rest of the things in the scene. That looks okay to me. Okay, let's go ahead and jump back to the game. And we want to go to our upper layer so we can see everything except for that torus. When this selected, where is it? Aha, there it is. When this selected empty fires, we want to send out a message with that fire exclamation mark message. So when you click the left mouse button and the ammo property is greater than 0, it's going to do the firing. It's going to duplicate the object. It's going to take one away from its own ammo property, and we're going to send out a message. It's an actuator, message actuator. We are not going to specify a to recipient here, but we will type in fire exclamation mark, and that's all we have to do except for connect it up to the and. So now when we fire, it's going to do three things. It's going to make a duplicate ring object, which will fire itself. It will take away one from ammo, and it'll send out that fire message. I think we're pretty much done here in terms of our limited ammunition setup and the HUD. The last thing we have to do actually though is take our camera. I'll press 0 to go through my camera view. We're going to add that HUD to it. And the way you do that is you select your camera, you click on add sensor. We're going to add an always sensor because we always want to overlay that HUD scene. And we want to add an actuator. It's a scene actuator, and I'll connect them up. And we're going to add an overlay scene. That's one of the modes for this scene actuator, add overlay scene. And we're going to overlay the HUD screen. Okay, you can go ahead and pause that if you need to catch up. But let's go ahead and press P to play the game. I've got 30, and when I'm firing, it's going down. And when I run out, it says 0. And now I can just drive around like I normally could. Of course, you can always drive around and shoot at the same time. That works as well. But again, you'll run out of ammo. Okay, that's all good and great, but we want to be able to refill our ammunition. So let's go ahead and add an ammo pack, which will just be a cube. So I'll go back to my not camera view. I'll zoom in. If my 3D cursor is somewhere else in my scene, I can press Shift C on my keyboard. Shift C will zoom out so you can see everything, and it will put the 3D cursor back in the middle of your scene, which is what we want. I'll press Shift A on my keyboard to add a mesh cube, just like that. And I'm going to scale it down. I'll tap S. I'll move it up and put it right on the ground there approximately. I'll add a material to it just to match the color to make it obvious for the player. I'll just maybe use one of my other materials. There we go. That little bright red cube is going to be our ammo pack. And when we hit this cube, we want to replenish the ammo. So what we're actually going to do here is put a collision on the ammo pack that when it detects that it gets hit by the character cube, it's going to send a message to the empty that says, hey, take that ammo integer property that you have and add 30 to it. We're going to bump it up by 30, but of course you can use your own number. So here's the thing. If we put the collision sensor on this little ammo pack, that's actually necessary because when you pick up the ammo pack, you actually want it to delete itself as well. And you can only have an object delete itself. You can't have some other object tell some other object to delete itself, if that makes sense. So what we have to do here is actually give our character a name. We can do that by giving it just a character property. So I'm going to click on or select my character cube. I'm going to add a game property. It doesn't matter what kind of property it is. It can be a string or an integer. It doesn't matter. I'm going to call my character me. And I'll press enter. That's a good name for it. It makes sense. And so on our ammo pack, what we want to do is add a sensor. It's going to be a collision sensor. And it's going to detect if it hits the property me. Again, that's a good name for it in this case. If it hits me or collides with me, we want it to do a few things. We want to shout out a message that says refill. So I'm going to add a new actuator. It's going to be a message actuator. The message will be refill exclamation mark. The exclamation mark is just for fun, of course. And so we'll connect these things up. So when this detects a collision with your main character, we're going to shout refill. This empty is going to actually have to know what to do when it hears that message refill. But this object, we also want it to delete itself. That's what I talked about just a second ago. So I'm going to add a second actuator here. It's going to be an edit object actuator. I'll connect it up so it does two things. When it collides, it sends out a message refill and it ends itself. We're going to just select the end object mode. So now it's going to end itself when it collides with our cube. Now, on our empty, we're going to have to add a new sensor for that refill message. So actually what I'll do is I'll just select my cube again in case you didn't get all that. We've got a collision sensor for me. When it detects that it collides with me, it's going to refill. One thing we might actually want to do here is I'm going to change the physics type of this object. I'll go up here with the ammo pack selected to the physics tab in the properties window. We don't want this to be a static object. We actually don't want it to have any kind of collision at all. And the way you do that is you can change it to a sensor object. Now a sensor object can still sense when it's colliding with something else, but a sensor object won't actually have any physics involved with it. And that's actually a good thing. It actually solves that issue where if you have two things colliding, like I had in the last video where we talked about health bars and lives, where the glitch happens where it doesn't actually detect the collision. It will stop, but it won't actually do the logic bricks when two things collide. Sensor seems to prevent that from happening because now the cube will actually just run through this object like it's sort of a ghost. But the logic will still be triggered with the collision sensor. So this ammo pack is a sensor object and it has these logic bricks. Let's go ahead and select the empty. I'm going to go ahead and collapse all of my logic bricks because we're going to add a couple more. I'm going to add a message sensor. We are listening for a message that says refill, exclamation mark, just like that. And when it hears refill, we're going to add to the property over here. The property will have gone down to 0 or it'll be at any other number. So I'm going to add a property actuator, and we're going to not assign to this property, we're going to add to it. The property we're adding to is called ammo, and we're going to add 30 to it. Okay, you can use any number you want, but this is how you do it. Let's go ahead and connect these two things up. So when it hears the refill message, it's going to bump up the ammo by 30. Let's go ahead and see if this works. I'll press P on my keyboard. I can drive around. In fact, what I should do is go through my camera view so that that number actually shows up where it should. Let's go ahead and press P to play the game. I can see my heads-up display in the top left corner. I can drive around. That's good and great. I can fire. My ammo goes down, and if I keep firing, I run out of ammo. I'll go ahead and pick up my ammo pack. You'll notice that my cube, the blue cube, did not kind of stutter at all. It didn't actually do anything to do with physics when I hit the ammo pack. But now, it's going to be able to fire more bullets. There's one little bug though, and I just noticed this now. The ammo heads-up display didn't replenish that number. Remember, we've got two different properties or variables that have that 30 number in it. So when I press P, I can fire, and it's making that number go down to 0, which matches, but when we pick up the ammo, it doesn't reflect, even though my actual ammunition has gone up. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to go back to my other scene. I'll go back to the HUD scene, and with my text object selected, it has to know about the refill message. So add another message sensor. It's going to be a subject refill, exclamation mark, and when it hears that refill, it's going to take this text property. So I'll go and add a property actuator, and I'll connect this up. We're going to add to the property text a value of 30, just like we did, exactly the same as we did with the empty objects property that was called ammo. Okay, let's go ahead and see if this all works. If you need to pause the video now, you can do that, but I'm going to jump back to my game scene, and I'm looking through my camera. I'll do a quick save here, Control S and then click, and I'll press P to play my game. And now I can fire, I can drive around, I can pick up ammunition. My ammo's now at 42, so I can keep going. It jumped up, and that was great. And now I've run out of ammo. Okay, that did work. Let's just do one little final test. I'll fire all my ammunition, so I've run out. And I'll go pick up the ammo pack, and as you can see, the ammo pack jumped up to 30. That'll be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.